As many as 25,000 residents and visitors were forced to evacuate 5 days ago before a wall of flames raced towards town.
For many generations, the town of Jasper and the parks surrounding it have been a source of pride.
We are, in this cycle that's going to keep repeating itself. It could be Banff next year, it could be Banff next month.
Hello and welcome to episode 223 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, one of the most beautiful places on Earth has been ravaged by an unfightable wildfire. Ironically, the crew spent some of their time protecting a fossil fuel pipeline.
That's a hilarious joke, James. I hope. Vermonters can get up to $6,000 towards a new EV if their old car was damaged in extreme flooding that was amplified because of climate change. Replacing old with new. I believe that's called the virtuous cycle. No, wait, it's the vicious cycle.
An East Coast city in Canada is saving money by buying wind power for their citizens. The Grinch Power Company isn't happy about losing out, though. So lock your doors this Christmas.
The Olympic city of Paris is going green with a big emphasis on dedicated bike paths between Olympic venues. And we're being told they're putting a big emphasis on clean energy sources like hydrogen. And we now join the Olympic opening ceremonies already in progress.
Getting the honor to light the Olympic cauldron, the flame that burns brightly throughout the games, symbolizing so much for these athletes and everyone involved. And how unique and how creative to be in a hydrogen-filled gas balloon.
It's starting to rain again. The rain had slacked up a little bit. The back motors of the ship are just holding it just enough to keep it from... It bursts into flames. Get it started. It's fighting, and it's rising terrible. Oh, the humanity.
All that aboard this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
So, yeah, I was watching the Olympic opening ceremonies. Did you watch that, James?
Yeah, I mean, how many hours was it?
It was way too long. We had the replay, right? So we didn't have to watch it live. So we kept skipping over the boring parts, like the speeches and, the parade of athletes. So skip. And it still took like at least 2.5 hours to watch the whole thing.
It was my favorite one that they've ever done, and I think it sets a precedent. I think it's also a brilliant move because you're spending billions of dollars to promote your city, essentially. Why not? Yeah. You don't do it from inside a stadium. I mean, you can do what China did and had all kinds of light shows and culture, but this was the perfect way to go. The rain didn't hamper it. I think that it worked just fine. There were some amazing things in it, but it was bloated, as the New York Times said. It was bloated. The opening ceremony was great, but bloated. Yeah, I mean... I don't know that Americans or many people in the world would have watched it, all of that. And there was some things that were risque, like a threesome, a menage a trois, that they, and then there was a lot of gender diversity. And, that's not going to play in large swaths of the world. So I wonder what they did about that, being that it was live and that they didn't tell anyone, what was going on. No one really knew. I don't think they had full rehearsals that the public was aware about. They kept it under wraps.
Yeah, that's right. It was all happening in public, but you couldn't rehearse it in public or it would spoil everything. So, somehow they pulled it off. There was all that rain and no one got electrocuted. Like that was a miracle in itself. But we're watching and they're getting to the part where they're going to light the Olympic flame. And you can see the balloon there. That's they're going up to the balloon with the flame. And my son, we're all watching it. And my son says, yeah, I hope that balloon's not filled with hydrogen.
It was.
And then a minute later, the announcer says, oh, the balloon is filled with hydrogen. And then quickly explain, well, not quickly, like 10 minutes later, explained, oh, by the way, those aren't real flames underneath the hydrogen-filled balloon. I don't know why they didn't use helium, but it's supposed to be a tribute to the first hydrogen balloon was in Paris, a couple hundred years ago or something. But,
So every night it goes up 200 feet so that Paris, the central Paris, because it's old, is flat. The skyscrapers are sort of on the edge in the business district. So a lot of actual Paris can see the flame, 200 feet in the air.
Yeah.
But it's not a flame. It's misting water and LED lights, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there was a story here from the Daily Mail that explains that was very much on purpose. I mean, not just because they didn't want to light the hydrogen balloon on flame, but that it was meant as a statement, like not using fossil fuels was part of their design of this whole thing. And it has always sort of bothered me, the enormous amount of natural gas that has to be burned for this. And like we have a restaurant in our town, Gulf's Steakhouse, that's had a flame burning outside of it for at least 50 years now. And it was always, it's always cool when you walk past it. It's like, ooh, the Gulf Steakhouse flame. But, 50 years of burning natural gas is maybe not great.
There was a myth that it was leftover French fry grease when I was a kid, but that's not true. It's natural gas. Yeah, no, it is cool. And maybe, a long time ago, that would have been okay when it started because a lot has changed in that 50 years. We know a lot more stuff now. And maybe they should have a LED and mist flame. Actually, it would look pretty cool if they could pull it off.
Well, there's those, you can get those LED light bulbs that sort of look like flames. I mean, it's not the same, obviously. A flame is still cool, but,
Well, I think it's uncomfortable now. So Jasper National Park is the big news story in Canada. Brian and I are in Canada. We're in Western Canada. We're a day's drive or so from Jasper, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. It's a little less accessible than Banff and a little bit more expensive than Banff, a little more restricted in the camping. But yeah, they evacuated 20,000 people, 5,000 residents, 15,000 visitors a few days ago.
Yeah, no, it was a terrible. I mean, it was looking for a while there that maybe the whole town was lost, but it's 30% approximately of the town destroyed. But the Jasper Park Lodge was also saved. I stayed there. It was about a year and a half ago. We talked about it on the podcast. My sister-in-law got married at the Jasper Park Lodge, and we had an amazing stay there. Jasper is, of course, stunningly beautiful. But I posted on my Instagram, one of the best pictures I got at the time was from the L&W restaurant in Jasper, because they have these trees growing inside the restaurant, and we were seated underneath one, and it made this fantastic photo. It's on my Instagram now, but after a couple of days, I was able to confirm that restaurant was destroyed by fire, sadly.
Is that right? It was
right on the edge of the damage zone. So the buildings just across the street to the west survived. They were right on the edge.
Right. Well, I'm happy to report that the EV chargers survived. They had only recently put in fast chargers. They're not terribly fast.
Yeah.
There's two flow 50 kilowatt chargers for something that is so important. I mean, you can spend time going to a restaurant and get a charge in an hour or so at 50 kilowatts, but...
Yeah. And of course, one of the gas stations exploded. Actually, the gas station is near that L&W restaurant, so that would definitely not have helped in the effort to save it.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. But I'm planning a trip to Calgary. Not quite Jasper, but so we've got my niece is getting married at the end of August, and we've known about this for over a year now. So I've been thinking about it for over a year now. And a year ago, right around now, I think is when we went out to BC on the West Coast, and that was keep in mind that I'm driving an EV, a older technology EV. It's a new car. It was brand new at the time, but it charges slow. It charges at 50 kilowatts max and then goes down. So it's a very slow charging car. It has decent range at about 417 kilometers or 260 miles.
Yeah.
But that's not good enough if you're charging slow. It takes a long time to charge, and I had impatient kids. And
you had to really debate whether or not it was worth it to take the EV. You ended up taking it last year, and
extremely glad I did. Extremely. It was just a delight to drive. It was more room than we thought we had. I actually enjoyed the experience. I don't think my kids did. And unfortunately, my kids are coming to the wedding. But, you know, they were a little bit more impatient about it. It was a okay way for my partner and I to travel. Like, you just take a break and go shopping and have a snack and go to the bathroom. And it's a nice little thing.
Because we have such a massive country, there's a real emphasis on making good time anytime you're on a road trip around here, because there's generally so much distance that you have to cover. So everyone gets like a sort of a Formula One kind of mindset when they're on a road trip of, like, you know, minimizing the time spent at your stops. And you just have to think a bit different.
Yeah. And I've been like that. And, you know, my family hasn't always, you know, they're like 40 minutes anywhere when they were younger. Now they're, you know, my son is like digesting by the time I figured out the charger, you know, like, you know, I'm looking forward to plug and charge, which means you could just plug into the flow rated chargers and then it'll just work. I did that the other night to test it out to see if it's still working. So that's good. You know, what I hope, Brian, in that I did this trip a year ago, the first leg of it to Calgary, is I was hoping things would improve. They have not. Nothing has changed. And there's been, you know, millions of dollars from the federal government in Canada to increase charging, and no one has done that here. They thought, well, it's good enough. Well, the freaking things are broken. Like, Swift Current might be sketchy. Like, one major city in the middle of the trip may not have charging for me. And because Musk fired his supercharger team, that means Chevy doesn't get access to the supercharger network. It was on the cusp of doing that. And I might have had that. I looked at it and I thought, you know, if you have any car, Brian, that's not my car, that's not a Tesla or a slow charging car, that supercharger network is the way to go. Like, I was planning it out on a better route planner to see what the charging would look like. It's way better on the Tesla network. If you have anything, you know, say you have an Ioniq 5 from Hyundai, or, you know, something that charges fast, you can take advantage of that 250 kilowatt Tesla charger and spend a fraction of the time. And, you know, the fast chargers that are available are from Petro-Canada, a gas station chain here, and they're never working. They're still, a year later, they're still not working. In fact, some of them, there is a co-op, there is another city in Alberta, because it's an oil petrol province, that doesn't have squat, Medicine Hat. And I'm actually going to stay overnight in Brooks, Alberta. I'm going to pull a Stockton and not do the whole trip because why? You know, and I'm going to go to Dinosaur Provincial Park, which is near there. There's a whole bunch of fossils, and it's quite fascinating, and it's badlandy and, you know, interesting there. So that's what we're going to do. But I'm just pissed off that there's a few dealerships that have popped up, and some of them say restricted only for Nissan customers. And they're not supposed to do that because they got money from the federal government. And if I find out that these guys are restricting the access and they got federal funding for it, I'm going to report them. I'm going to take the time to do that. And anyone else out there should do the same, because, you know, the federal government paid a large chunk for those chargers, and they can't keep them to themselves. And they sure as hell shouldn't be blocking them, because that's what the Toyota dealership in Regina is doing where we are. They've got a new charger up, but it's filled up with their own cars because they don't give a crap. They don't understand anything about it. It's frustrating. You're going to find me getting angry today a lot.
Yeah, we've been doing this podcast for 4.5 years, and there's been incredible changes and incredible progress, but it just never seems to happen really fast enough.
So last year we stayed at a hotel in Surrey, BC that was quite a ways away from Vancouver, but not bad. It was a 40-minute drive, and we enjoyed that drive because everything's new to us, right? It was the first time we had been there. And it's across the street from a, you know, community sports complex where, I don't know, badminton, tennis, track and field, everything happens, big parking lot. And now, at that time, they had a level 2 charging, which is, you know, kind of what I have at home here, but not...
Yep, overnight charging.
Better than a normal plug-in. In that lot from, I forget the brand name of the company, but it's one of the more common brand names. It had just broke. So 2 chargers there did nothing for me. So I had to drive to a fast charger 10 minutes away, which was fine. It worked out fine. But now that same parking lot, BC Hydro, God bless them. And by the way, they've invited us to the Fully Charged Expo out there. Not personally, but they've given us a 50% discount voucher because I'm a customer. They're putting in 2 fast chargers there, or 4 fast chargers there. So what a difference that makes. that hotel would be my hotel of choice because it's got 4 fast chargers in a parking lot across the street. Well, it's actually adjacent to us, not even across the street. So that's cool. And then they're building the transit system, the rail transit system out there. In a few years, it'll be done. And that place will be really close to connecting to the SkyTrain. Yeah, so that's great. It was a ChargePoint charger, by the way, which is often not working. But these are going to be flow chargers, and there's some flow chargers there. And yeah, so it's interesting. Yeah, they have level 2 as well, and it's really fast level 2. Like one of them is like what I have in the driveway, about 6.5 kilowatts, but one is about 16. So some cars, like my Bolt, does 11.5 kilowatts, and that's really not much use to me because I couldn't come up with that much power at home. But it would be, kind of interesting to have a shorter level 2 charging on the road, take advantage of that. Some cars can do that fast, but it's nice to see that those are starting to pop up. I noticed that the Tesla destination chargers are quite fast. The level 2 for Teslas are often a lot faster than the CCS, the non-Tesla branded charger.
Mine's 11 kilowatts at home, but yeah, I believe they do go up to 16 kilowatts, but maybe you need, you probably be a bigger amperage connection or something.
Yeah, but at hotels and things, I've noticed they're way better for, if you look on PlugShare then. So I did get a hotel in Calgary that has charging. It took me 2 days of actual work to find one, and I found it by accident. I was getting so frustrated because I searched for hotels because, when I book a hotel, I need to get the most for my money. And I'm checking on location and the ratings and everything like that. And there's always something that kills it. Like, there was a murder there last night and no one cared. And, things like that I have to, it wasn't that bad. But, there's always somebody that says the ratings the reviews will turn you away. So I did found one. It's called the Element Hotel in Calgary Airport Hotel. It's not really near the airport, but it's kind of near the airport in the eastern part of town near the Trans-Canada Highway. So, yeah, it has complimentary EV charging and complimentary bicycle lending. They will lend you a bicycle, which grabbed my heart right there. And it's a new hotel, so it's nice. And the reviews are 4.5 on Google. So, yeah, and then even if that falls through, I've got a charging location 11 minutes away. There aren't that many chargers in Calgary. It's a big city. It's what? Yeah. 1.2 million or something? I can't remember what the population of Calgary is, but it's a lot. Because they're the oil capital, they don't have EV chargers. So there's I don't know how many of them are. There's 4 or 5. And, one of them's probably not working. And so, which is odd that they would do that because they are so near Banff and the Rocky Mountains of Canada, where most tourists in the world go when they go to Canada. A lot of their economy is dependent on tourism, and they're screwing the hooch there. The pooch, the dog is not happy. What I did, Brian, is because I searched for hotels with the Google Maps, because it comes up with prices and sometimes you get a deal. I put a star on my Google Maps for where all the superchargers were, non-Tesla superchargers. And they're, it's unlike Tesla, who has like 8 or 20 stalls, these chargers for non-Teslas only have 1 or 2 sometimes. So at best 4. So, that's why there's a number of them. So I put stars on my Google Maps of all the locations, and then I searched for hotels and I could see where the stars were, and that really helped me. And I found a hotel not too far from a charger, relatively speaking, plus it has one, and it seems great. So, yeah, looking forward to that trip, and I will update you. I'm just disappointed that there's 2 cities along the way that could be sketchy for me. And they wouldn't be if I had access to the Tesla charging network, which is coming for non-Tesla brands. And all those chargers along that corridor are available to non-Tesla brands, like Rivian's can charge there and Ford can charge there, and they do. But the trip north to my city where my kid goes to school, that Tesla charger is not open to the public. So I'm hoping they build a second set because it's going to be very busy in the wintertime when more people have Teslas. Yeah, my partner went to a cottage north of Toronto recently, and so she had to rent a car, and she didn't want to spend the time to do the research. Like she thought about getting a Tesla. She'd prefer not to drive a gas car, but she just didn't want to do the research. And then she got to this cottage, and it was littered with Teslas. Like there was nothing but Teslas, so clearly it wouldn't have been an issue to charge, but you do have to spend that extra time sometimes. Well, I hate to say it, but I've ran, different things like Tesla's through the Better Route Planner on different things, like from here to Denver, which is like, 1,800 kilometers. It's much better in a Tesla, even a standard range Tesla in the summertime. In the wintertime, you bought a longer range vehicle so that you could handle the winter, and that's covered that problem. But yeah, it's frustrating because Musk is such a douchebag, and so many people are affected by the Musking of the brand that I don't want to seem like a toxic male tech bro if I'm driving a Tesla around, but I'm seriously considering it. Buying one used as a used market is coming down, and that would certainly. But again, this is like a once a year thing for us. We don't do a lot of traveling, but my God, it's a lot of planning, and my God, it shouldn't be a lot of planning. It's we should be past that. We should be progressing, and we're not. And that's my point. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, we're still in a bit of an EV dead spot where we live. Okay, so we're going to talk about Vermont, which we talked about a while ago on the podcast, a small U.S. state. They were recently suing the fossil fuel companies to help pay for all of the damage that they've had because of extreme weather that's caused by climate change. Now they've got a new incentive up to $6,000 for residents of Vermont to replace their flood-damaged cars with an EV. So they had extreme flooding, lots of cars got ruined, and this is a program that already existed, but they're just sort of loosening up the rules to allow people who had their cars damaged in the flood to go in and hopefully get an EV. I think it includes plug-in hybrids as well, or, even high-efficiency vehicles. But this is the kind of thing that I like, because the best time to go green is when you're replacing something that's at the end of its life. So if your car was damaged by a flood, obviously it's at the end of its life. And so a little bit of incentive to go, replace at that time, which is why, I also wanted to mention this story from Vancouver, the city of Vancouver, the clean, green city of Vancouver. They recently reversed a decision about allowing new natural gas. New natural gas hookups were banned in new buildings in Vancouver. And for reasons I cannot understand, City Council reversed this decision, and they're now allowing new natural gas in new buildings. But, it's an expensive thing to change the world to clean energy. It's totally doable, but the most cost-efficient way to do that is when something has reached the end of its life cycle. And so if you're now allowing new buildings in Vancouver to have a natural gas hookup, well, guess what? They're not going to want to get rid of those natural gas hookups 2 years from now, 3 years from now. They're going to want to keep it for 10, 20, 30 years. But we have to take these opportunities that, if your furnace is getting old, that is the time to replace it with a heat pump, and especially in Vancouver, the mild weather on the coast there, they have no need for natural gas out there. Heat pumps can absolutely do everything. But yeah, it's this idea of, we got to replace these things when they're at the end of their life. Please try and make that the point that, because if your furnace is dying now and you end up replacing it with another natural gas furnace, well, guess what? You're not going to want to get rid of it. You're going to want to keep it for 10, 20 years, 30 years to pay it off. So I don't know. I like the incentive in Vermont, but bad news for British Columbia and Vancouver.
As many as 25,000 residents and visitors were forced to evacuate 5 days ago before a wall of flames raced towards town. The fire has now merged with another wildfire and quadrupled in size. Nearly 70% of the town is still standing, however, and crews are focused on keeping it that way.
An intense wildfire burned through the historic National Park town site of Jasper in the Rocky Mountains of Alberta, Canada. Jasper National Park is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. It is the pride of every Canadian and beloved by approximately 2.5 million visitors a year. The fossil fuel apologist and possible climate denier, Danielle Smith, runs the province as the premier. And if she's not a climate denier, she's a climate destroyer. She is constantly poo-pooing efforts to address climate change. But she had this to say after the town was hit by an unstoppable wildfire.
For many generations, the town of Jasper and the parks surrounding it have been a source of pride. with some of the most beautiful scenery in the entire in the world. A feeling that even though you've just left home, you're coming home.
The same jackwagon is constantly apologizing for the fossil fuel industry, constantly diminishing climate change and those who are trying to protect it. She introduced a moratorium on solar and wind projects last year that basically killed the industry and made it very difficult for them to erect things anywhere anymore. So that is really diminished. They were on fire there, no pun intended. They were putting up all kinds of solar on a grand scale, far more than anywhere in Canada. She said things like, people aren't really willing to fight climate change. So I guess, what are we going to do? That is, addressing, the EV adoption in Alberta. Of course, in your borders there, it sucks. But if you look outside your bubble, the world is changing and you guys are rednecks over there. You're not addressing what needs to be done. So even, this is from the Narwhal. This is kind of a left of center news organization in Canada. Even though the Trans Mountain pipeline, this is a pipeline that runs through the pristine Rocky Mountains, through Jasper. It was recently twinned. I saw them working on it last year when I went out through the Rockies, as it goes all the way to the coast so that they can export fossil fuels. They spent time protecting this infrastructure where they, maybe they could have protected historic buildings if they weren't worried about this freaking pipeline, which is ironic, of course, because we know that climate change is affecting this sort of thing, and I'll get to more of that in a bit. So even though the Trans Mountain recently estimated the wildfire risk to its pipeline running through Jasper National Park is low, quote unquote, crews were fighting to protect it this week. Quote, Canadian wildfire reaches Jasper. Firefighters battle to protect oil pipelines, said a Reuters headline. Park Canada confirmed in a social media post on Wednesday evening it is protecting critical infrastructure from out-of-control wildfire. Yeah, some of that is, the water treatment facility and things like that, but also that freaking pipeline. I can understand why, because you don't want the pipeline to blow up too, right?
Well, sure. That would add fuel to the fire, literally.
Yeah, so it listed examples such as the town's hospital, wastewater treatment facility, and parts of Trans Mountain, a 1,150 kilometer pipeline that transports both crude oil and refined petroleum products from Edmonton to refineries and exports, that's in Alberta, right to the coast, and exports to terminals in BC and Washington state coasts. The portion that runs through the park was twinned in 2008, actually. Climate change is responsible for increasing intense fires. This is John Vallant, the author of Fire Weather. He wrote a book after Fort McMurray, which is basically a city in the far northeast of Alberta, where the oil sands are, and they were hit by fire a few years ago. He wrote this book called Fire Weather. This is a clip of him talking about what he sees coming next.
We are, in this cycle that's going to keep repeating itself. It could be Banff next year. It could be Banff next month. Honestly, it could be the west side of Vancouver or parts of Calgary. We are really exposed right now, and we are being told over and over again that we are not ready for 21st century catastrophic fire. Well, this is the nature of the beast, as Darby Allin called it back in 2016. 21st century fire has certain hallmarks, and that is driven by climate change. We have higher temperatures. We have lower relative humidities. We have more evaporation. We have much drier forests, and that creates a space and an opportunity for fire to not just burn, but to act explosively with astonishing speed. And over again, when I interview folks who've gone through this, all of them are shocked by the speed of the fire and how quickly the embers flew, how far they flew, and how quickly they ignited.
So what's going on here, Brian, is that the embers would take off and preheat the air. So before the place was burned, you had all these embers. There's so many of them that it was making it super hot. Mm-hmm. And then when the fire got there, it just exploded. And there was 100-meter high flame that was just massively high and a wall. And this is, so many people on social media are blaming the federal government because they own Jasper National Park, because it's a national park. But in truth, this Alberta premier was responsible for cutting forest, budgets. And the part of the problem is that they protected the forest for 100 years, not let it burn. But it's also climate change, and this is getting worse. And this is not going to stop. You're not going to have a freaking tourist industry in Alberta because of climate change. And one day you're going to have to reconcile with that.
Yeah, and of course it's affecting us.
The Clean Energy Show wants to hear from you. Contact us by email at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com or by online voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow.
And the fires are, of course, affecting us in terms of smoke. Somebody posted a chart the other day online of the number of smoke hours. Like, we've always had a little bit of smoke in the air here in the summers, but, it used to be something like 10 or 12 hours a year was kind of the average. And now we're getting into hundreds of hours, as we frequently talk about here on the show.
Listen, I went to take star photos with my daughter the other night because I had a good sleep for once. So I figured I could stay up and nothing. It's just a white sky when you do long exposures. It's taking away nature in a sense. I used to go in the pool and look at the stars, and now that's not even possible anymore.
All right, so on to Paris and the Olympics. We've talked a bit about this before. The story is from Electrek, and since the Olympics have started, I thought it was a nice kind of recap of what they're doing in the city of Paris to reduce pollution in anticipation of the games. They've had all kinds of incentives. They've been paying residents up to $4,000 to replace their gas-guzzling cars with a bike. They have tripled fees for massive SUVs, and they have banned cars in the city center altogether. But in addition to that, they've been really adding bike infrastructure. So along with the Olympic Games, they've added another 60 kilometers, 37 miles of bike lanes that specifically connect the Olympic sites in Paris. And so these are all painted pink. So if you're a tourist, if you're new to Paris and you're there for the Olympics, you can very easily see the pink paths that will take you to the various venues around Paris. They've also installed 10,000 new bike racks. So this will give all of these riders a secure place to lock outside of the Olympic venues. And then when the Olympics are over, they're going to distribute these bike racks throughout the city of Paris. There's always a discussion around the Olympics of, is this really make sense for, to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on these games? But, the good part of it, the part that I like, is that it generally does contribute positively to infrastructure. And I think that that's a great example of it. All of this new biking infrastructure, all of these new bike racks, they're going to be distributed around the city afterwards. Lime is there, the e-bike and scooter sharing service. There's apparently lots of Lime bikes and scooters available for people visiting Paris. And by all accounts, so far, with the Olympics going for a few days now, it sounds like it's been really going well.
So they're banned cars from the city, and the air quality has improved. They've tripled parking fees for large SUVs who aren't from the city. And this was to improve air quality, and it worked.
Yeah.
40% better.
Yeah. And they worked hard on improving the water quality in the Seine. There was I think a story today that it's maybe not as clean as they want it to be for the upcoming triathlon. So we'll see there, but it sounds like they've made some nice strides.
So are the athletes rebelling and not going in the water because of the E. coli?
I guess we're going to find out. That I just read the headline today.
Yeah, well, the thing is, rain is bad, and they just had rain for the opening ceremonies and the day after. But yeah, it was, I'm interested in cross-country mountain biking. They only have 2 races, and that's it, and it's over. One for the women, one for the men, and they have to build this large facility. They built it on a landfill, which is like a mountain on the edge of Paris, and yeah, it came and went so fast. But anyway, I want to talk about St. John, Canada. This is in New Brunswick. So there's a wind farm out there that they put up, and it's undercutting the power utilities' electricity prices by more than a half. So St. John has its own power utility, kind of like Saskatoon does here, but they repair their own stuff, but they buy the power from someone else, mostly from the provincial power grid, which is what they're doing out there. That's called NB Power, New Brunswick Power, because the province is called New Brunswick. So electricity generated at the Birch Hill Wind Farm in St. John and sold to St. John Energy in 2023 is undercutting prices being charged to the municipal utility. They're getting cheaper power from a wind farm than they are from the power grid. And the power grid is not happy about that now, because if you don't buy their power, then that goes up for everyone who does buy their crappy fossil fuel power. So it's a discount so deep it has NB Power concerned about others making a similar choice to bypass its system and pricing in a similar way. This reminds me of here in Saskatchewan a few years ago when they cut the solar subsidies and the tariff, the feed-in tariff that you got, because everybody was jumping on board. And they said, well, it's going to make it expensive for everyone else. We can't do that. It's a mindset that drives me batty. Quote, there is an electricity system that needs to be paid for, Brad Cody, the NB Power vice president, said last month during an Energy and Utilities Board hearing, to the extent that customers have the wherewithal to escape NB Power being their supplier of choice. That causes cost shifting onto other customers. Well, it wouldn't happen that way if you had your own goddamn renewables, you jackwagon. It's a Saskatchewan term I'm trying to spread to the rest of the world. So that's a concern. The Birch Hill Wind Farm is jointly owned by by a local First Nation and the Nova Scotia-based wind energy company, Natural Forces. It opened in June 2023. And CBC News has put some pieces of the puzzle together and found that the city paid only $41 per megawatt hour for the wind electricity, and that's only 38% of the cost of what they are paying to the power utility. 38% of the cost. And you have a lower cost for the same electron. Guess what? Maybe you should, make your electrons from wind or solar. And they're whining as if renewables make up some people's power cheaper, and it's not fair. And it's not fair to the renewables. So just like we had in this province. And if it's also the utility allowed the utility to implement a rate increase of 9.2% for residential customers in St. John, but it's higher. The rate increase was higher for everyone else in the province. So the city did go up, but it went up less than everyone else because they had to pay for the wind farm. But even so, even the transmission lines they had to build for that wind farm, it's still cheaper. It's still a lot cheaper. Those financial benefits come despite St. John Energy having to spend millions of dollars on new transmission and distribution infrastructure to handle the new supply. And this is after the provincial power utility declined to allow the electricity onto its own grid. Even for a fee, they said no. Ho! So who will be left to pay for the system that we enjoy, the utility cried. As rates go up even more, people are turning to renewables, and the problem compounds itself. And we've said this many times on the show that this would happen, and it is. This is NB Power's generation mix, the power utility in the province. They have 12 hydro dams, but they also have coal, oil, and diesel power generating stations. Oil and diesel, this is something you would see in the Arctic Circle, where a small community is up there and they need electricity, or a remote island that has 300 people on it. This is not something a province should be burning oil and diesel generation for a massive power grid. It's the worst I've ever heard of. It's probably worse than coal, or pretty near. So they also have a nuclear generating station and one solar farm. And they also purchase natural gas-powered facilities from other people. Anyway, drives me batty. We're going to see more of this. It is a problem, and it seems like some people just don't get it.
Yeah, and there is no law that people can't make their own power. Utilities need to get on board. Okay, a quick update on Cummins. This is the company that makes diesel engines, and I got interested in Cummins when I visited their world headquarters in the beautiful city of Columbus, Indiana. So we've been talking periodically about Cummins because I would love for them to be able to make a successful switch from diesel engines to other powertrains because I love that city of Columbus so much. Anyway, there's a story here from Electrek titled Cummins' New Powertrain Test Facility Proves Hydrogen is Super Sketchy. And it's really just the same joke we keep making about the Hindenburg blowing up. I mean, there is possibly a place for hydrogen in a clean energy future as long as it's made green, but you can never escape the fact that this stuff is extremely flammable and explosive. So they have a new dyno facility, and it's for ultra-low and zero-emission powertrain technologies. They're trying to be powertrain agnostic. So they are looking into battery electric as well, but, hydrogen as well. So these are the steps that they have to take to keep their staff safe from hydrogen. And this is in Darlington, UK, their new powertrain test facility. So these are the safety measures that they have to take at this facility that will test hydrogen vehicles. So it says, with regards to hydrogen, the test area features a series of safety checks. These include sensors placed around the vehicle and the interior of the facility to monitor for fuel leaks. The interior walls are designed to protect test engineers in the event of an explosion, while exterior walls have specially designed plates to alleviate blast pressure. Additionally, the HVAC system is capable of renewing all the air in the chamber more than once per minute, which helps to prevent the buildup of dangerous gas pockets. So Cummins has spent $16.5 million on this new facility. This is not cheap, especially when you have to prepare for possible massive explosions. They did break ground on a new $2 billion battery factory in Mississippi. So, they are exploring all technologies, but I don't know. There are some players that have already decided that hydrogen may be a dead end for these type of vehicles, but Cummins still working on it.
Yikes. That's scary. I mean, things do happen in battery plants, but not very often. And it's certainly, I don't know. I don't understand. I think it's a waste of time. Hydrogen's a waste of time for transportation. I think the new battery improvements that we've seen, the breakthroughs, the Chinese commercializing them already this year, show that it's not going to be an issue. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
A 12-kilowatt solar array on the roof of the Watts Willowbrook Church of Christ, located in the predominantly Black and Hispanic city of Compton in Los Angeles County, will help the congregation cut its bills in half. It's funny. Churches don't seem like a thing for power, but they're doing it. And
there you go.
Yeah. It's a good thing. Here's what the electricity generation in the United States will add in the next 9 months. Solar, 41 gigawatts, 6 for wind, but battery is going to be 16. So a lot more battery storage is being added compared to wind, 10 more megawatts. Nuclear, 45 megawatts, which is virtually nothing. Gigawatts, and they're actually adding a bit of hydro as well. A lawsuit has been filed by 15 Saskatchewan residents, where Brian and I live in Canada, ages 15 to 80, arguing that a plan by the provincial government and power utility SaskPower to expand gas-fired electricity generation violates charter rights to life, security, and security of person and equality. Think of that as constitutional rights in the United States. That's our charter. The applicants are arguing that the government and the utility SaskPower plan to allow a certain level of emissions, and it's not a good level. It's what's going to interfere with the applicants' charter rights of life. And it's time for CS Fast Fact. This is via Dr. Paul Dorfman, chair of Nuclear Consult. 67% of the energy produced by a nuclear plant is lost as waste heat. I didn't know it was that high. That's extremely high.
You'd think they'd be able to harvest that somehow.
Yeah. And I think some new designs are more efficient. 70% of fossil fuel burn is lost as waste heat when you're generating electricity from fossil fuels. China doubles the cash subsidies to propel EV sales as economic growth falls short. So they are struggling. The economy is struggling, and they are doubled the EV incentives. They're conventional. If you replace your conventional car, i.e. gas or diesel, with an EV, you can get a subsidy of almost $3,000 US, and that's double what it was a few days ago. A Brazilian cattle rancher has been ordered to pay more than $50 million for destroying part of the Amazon rainforest in order to restore the previous carbon sink. Last week, a federal court in Brazil froze the assets of Dirk Kruger to pay a compensation for the damage he had caused to the climate through illegal deforestation. He did not have the right to do that, apparently. Australia's solar capacity as of March 2024 is 35.6 gigawatts. Or, at noon on a sunny day, that would output as much as 35 nuclear plants. But the remarkable thing about those 35 nuclear plants at noon on a sunny day is 2/3 of them on rooftops. That's the power of rooftops, Brian. It's far exceeded what almost anyone thought possible.
Amazing.
2/3 of that is on 3.6 million million rooftops in Australia, because electricity is expensive. You have really good solar production. It all pans out. Man gets third-degree burns from walking on sand dunes in Death Valley. That story's in The Guardian. It's another CS fast fact. Building collisions have trimmed the total number of U.S. birds by as much as 9%. 9% to buildings. So people complain about wind turbines. They say don't build them. Well, don't build buildings either then. I don't know. Thanks to Joe Biden's IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, there are more factory construction taking place right now than there has been in 100 years. It's been 100 years since this amount of factories have been built in the United States. On 21 of July, Earth registered its warmest day in more than 100,000 years. You may have read about that many different places. It's made headlines. Offshore wind is going to power 20 million UK homes within 5 years, says the new Labour Prime Minister, Starmer. Chevrolet Equinox EV in the United States is now cheaper to lease than the gas version. That's a popular vehicle. It's a small SUV and one of the most popular segments in the U.S. And now it doesn't make any sense to do that, to lease the gas version. If you do any sort of research and learn about it or listen to this podcast, that'll be, evident to you. And finally, this week, Inside EV says the U.S. has 145,000 gas stations, and data from the Global Trade Association for Convenience and Refueling Retail and Fuel Retailing says that they have 145,000 gas stations, but the U.S. has 65,000 public EV chargers now, including 10,000 fast chargers, and the experts expect EV public chargers will likely exceed gas stations by 2032. So, and I suspect it might even be faster than that, but yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah, because it won't just be the adding of EV stations, it will be the closing of gas stations. All right, that's our show for this week. You can contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com, around social media. We're Clean Energy Pod. And we have videos on TikTok and YouTube, including special content not featured on the podcast.
The video version of our podcast is currently released on Sunday, so check that out if you want to. We have a Clean Energy store. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Donate if you can with PayPal in your show notes. If you're new, please subscribe, because that gets you your show delivered every week, and we'll see you next time.
See you next week.